Yes, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. I'm very happy to be here and speak today about a very important topic, a topic that I think we've heard slightly a bit about it already today, maybe not as in the word self-sovereign identity, but the concept of it definitely. So I'm a project manager at Nimbus Consultancy. It's been working for almost 2 decades now, consulting businesses, governmental bodies. We also worked with the ENISA a lot, and I'm happy to present here today with the topic self-sovereign identity, buzzword, or new paradigm for digital identities. So we're going to start with the agenda. Firstly, I would like briefly explain the core concept of SSI, but as I said, we heard a lot, so I will keep that short. Then I will give a little summary about the current status of SSI, and in particular, I'll be using the Gartner Hype Cycle. Then I will be presenting a few informations about the current projects that we have going on in Germany. It's the showcase program Secure Digital Identities. And last but not least, I will try to answer this question of my today's presentation and give a few final thoughts on it. Okay, so let's start. This is the self-sovereign identity landscape. I know it's very, very short, and this is just a few logos here that I put in just to show that this topic, self-sovereign identity, definitely is not just a buzzword, but it's something going on at the moment. And not just with new businesses and startups that have been founded in the last years who actually try to make this as see this as a market opportunity and sell products in this field. We have standardization organizations such as W3C, and we have publicly funded projects such as the Showcase program that we have in Germany or under Horizon 2020, so EU-funded projects. So that as a front statement that we do see a lot happening in this field. So now to get a bit deeper in the topic, we heard a lot about these 3 words already, so this is just briefly explained for the following graphics that I will show you, the 3 roles that we have. So we have the issuer, we've got the holder, and we've got the verifier. The issuer, as we heard already a lot, is responsible for creating accurate and trustworthy creation of identity attributes, or we also heard the word credentials today. The holder has usually the sole power, or in the best case, the sole power over this proof and administrates it, like we will hear later in self-sovereign identity concept. And then we've got the verifier, or the relying party, who's requesting certain credentials or certain proofs for, in order to provide services. Okay, so before we speak about a new paradigm, maybe we should look first what's the old paradigm, or what are we currently at. So here we have 3 different types of identity or identity systems where we could basically say that the isolated identities were sort of the start. So there every service does their own authentication. So the service provider is just issuer and verifier at the same time. How does it work? We all know it. You want to use a service, you have to create an account and log in. And you have to do that for several services. So we've been doing this for quite a few years. Until then, it changed a little bit more into the federated identity systems. So what do we do nowadays? We log onto services with one central identity provider, such as, for example, Facebook or Google we have, but also as it's wishingly described or defined in IDAS Chapter 2 as well. So this is the federated concept. So we have a centralized identity provider. And if we go back to the roles, in this case, the provider is both issuer and holder of those identities. And then last but not least, what I will talk today about is self-sovereign identities, which is the decentralized organization of identity data. What does that mean? That means that we have, again, verifiable credentials, so cryptographically secured digital evidence or proof that we usually store in a wallet that we already heard in the previous presentations. So these ones are the 3 models, and just to show a little bit more, so we have the isolated one, we have Alice, or like a user, a citizen who creates an account for each service. We have the federated identities where we have a central identity provider that you can log in and use different services with. And then we have the self-sovereign identities. This is probably, or the triangle at least, something that you might or might not have seen already quite a few times. We've got our three roles again here. We've got the issuer who issues a verifiable credentials to the holder, stores it into the wallet, and then the holder is able to present a presentation of this verifiable credential to the verifier in order to access services. What is different, or what can be different, is the data registry. So we haven't heard that word much today yet, but so I'm going to use it. It can be a blockchain. It doesn't have to be a blockchain. We heard already in previous presentations in Poland. It's self-sovereign identity based on PKI. So here, it's maybe at the beginning as well important to understand it can be a distributed ledger technology, but it can also be different forms. What is the potential of this? Is the zero-knowledge proof. So the zero-knowledge proof is quite interesting. We also heard about it before already. We had exactly the same example, I think, about presenting to someone, I'm over 18, without sharing actually even maybe my exact date of birth or the month I was born in. So zero-knowledge proof can be combined with verifiable presentations. And what is their serve, or why do they matter? They matter because you can show that these credentials or that a claim is valid and verified without showing actual details. So we don't have this over-identification that we already heard today as well. So some examples, apart from being over 18, we also have I'm allowed to park my car here, I'm allowed to board this plane, or I can sit in business class. So all these examples we can identify ourselves with the proper technological means without oversharing actual information about our data. For example, maybe not even our name if it's not necessary. So to sum it up, we can say that zero-knowledge proof support the user's data privacy. There's a big potential in it that needs to be further explored because there's no personal identification stored in the data registry. And the second one, which is a more broader statement, but as we mentioned, IDAS 2, it can also be maybe a potential attribute attestations as it's seen in the current revision of IDAS. What are the challenges? Here, I just want to briefly mention a few questions. We're not going to talk so much in detail, but they still matter because we're going to have to see how further also in the hype cycle this maybe affect the different stages that we have. So obviously, the self-sovereign identity approach is focused on the user, and that's right, and that's what the basic idea is. But still, we must make sure to be able to also verify the issuer. So is the issuer actually the right organization to issue the specific credential? Or how do we ensure that the credential was provided by the user and was not stolen? Maybe someone took my smartphone and used it without my permission. Then obviously the information itself that we can find on the credential, has it been maybe modified or manipulated, if it's still valid or not. Or what we also heard a lot is revocation is a very important thing and turns out to be a challenge as well when we talk about this whole concept. Okay, but how do we solve these challenges, or how do they reflect where we're at the moment? I want to introduce the Gartner's hype cycle. So this was not invented by Nimbus or me. So this is a method to say something about emerging new technologies. And so I put here the graphics from the estimation from Gartner from 2021. What it shows is we have different stages, and we have the according expectation of the technology. So what is our expectation towards the technology? We have 5 different stages. The first one is the innovation trigger, so something that causes a breakthrough, that causes interest in a technology. And that it goes so far that we reach to a peak on inflated expectations. So there's a wave of buzz, which fits because that's in the title as well of today, so a buzzword. So it becomes very popular. There's many more expectations, public interest, governmental interest, citizens get interested in this topic. And then obviously if we go up, we reach a peak, and then we go through a stage of disillusionment. What does that mean? That means that maybe we cannot fulfill all of our expectations. Maybe the projects are not achieving the goals that they're supposed to achieve. Maybe businesses are not as successful as they thought they would be. So that's why we're going through a phase of disillusionment. But then certainly, or suddenly the projects or early adopters start evolving, technology improves, and we are reaching towards a slope of expectations, which means that we overcome these initial hurdles, for example, the challenges I just showed you. Where does this whole Gartner circle end, or where does it lead us to, is the plateau of productivity. So that means there's a sharp rise in adoption, which could be understood as my question today, the new paradigm, for example. So we see people are using it, people are accepting a new technology, and it becomes a normal new paradigm of our daily life. So as you can see here, or I can show you a bit closer on this picture, they place decentralized identity on the peak of inflated expectations, so we just passed it, means we're heading towards the stage of disillusionment, according to Gartner. So what I did now is I tried to make my own graphs based on that hype cycle on self-sovereign identity, maybe not as pretty as the one from Gartner, but it shows where do we stand with self-sovereign identity. So we have, I added a few numbers or years, dates to support this thesis, which is that around 2016 we could say, okay, it started to become a buzz, or it started to become, it was the breakthrough, not just because Christopher Allen's thesis on self-sovereign identity has been published there, but also generally it was more spoken about. Then we could see more and more around 2018, 21, projects developing, not only the showcase projects that I will present to you later, but also on different levels, such as on the EU Horizon 2020, businesses, startups were founded. So more or less we reached the peak of expectation already. So here I would agree also with Gartner's estimation. I put this year, 2021 and 2022, also going towards the disillusionment. Why? Because, like I said, we have still some challenges, or there was, by Professor Ramberger, mentioned already some projects that had or faced some initial hurdles where we thought, okay, maybe we focus too much on the user, maybe we should also look at the issuer, at the verifier, or, for example, a governance framework. I mentioned in that triangle, I put the word trust framework. All these things are still very important standards. There's a lot of standardization bodies who are already dealing with this topic, but we still need to define proper and valid standards. So all these reasons, all these are reasons why I think that we are at the moment maybe heading towards a phase or stage of disillusionment, which doesn't matter, that doesn't mean that it will not have a breakthrough again, or that we're not going to go up in the curve again. As you can see here, maybe end of 2022 towards 2024, we're going to go up again. Why? Because the projects are going to show results. They're actively working on use cases. We have IDAS 2, which doesn't mention self-sovereign identity specifically, but basically supports the concept of it. So we do have, not only on the technological level, but also on a regulatory level, things and projects going on, which means that we can be positive towards the future and towards a plateau of productivity, saying that, it will become maybe a new paradigm. Okay, I'm looking at the time, so now we're going briefly to the examples from Germany. So what do we have? We have a showcase program called Secure Digital Identities that is funded by the Ministry of Economy and Digital and Climate. It just changed their names. So it's approximately 550 million euros of funding. We've got 4 consortiums, which is partners including research institutes, big companies, small and medium enterprises, and we've got the public administration and science in it as well, which is important to create a really interoperable ecosystem. We have the accompanying research team, which is where Nimbus is part of, so we support the projects not only on an operational level, but on a content and technical level with these topics. Those are the 4 consortia that we have, IDDI, ID Union, ONCE, and SDCA. And if you look here, just quickly, a few statements about the companies. So, which is interesting is that we have showcase regions all over Germany, that we have over 100 use cases that these projects focus on, and they're all exploring the potential of distributed ledger technologies and self-sovereign identities in general. And the fields of use cases also vary from e-government, mobility, industry 4.0. So it's really a broad range. Okay, so this is so much about the projects. Where does that lead us? So we have these projects on, they're showing and use cases, they're trying to be interoperable. So it's time to try to find an answer to this question. I placed a quote here from Arno Fiedler, who's the CEO of Nimbus, who said, "Distributed self-sovereign identity infrastructures are not trustworthy per se, even if Bob and Alice understand each other and Mallory's on vacation." What does that mean? So I put 3 final thoughts for this presentation here, which is first, build new ways on existing roads. What does that mean? There's not the one way for digital identities and not the one way for self-sovereign identities. We heard it earlier. You can try to make self-sovereign identities using PKI. So there's different options, and you should always look what kind of systems, EID systems, do we have in our country, or regarding IDAS, for example. Just try to make the best use possible of existing EID systems before creating something new out of scratch. Second, SSI does not mean DIY, so it does not mean do it yourself. It means that we need a trustworthy governance framework. Yes, it is user-centric, but it will still need to have a trustworthy governance framework where we can actually follow common standards and find common ground on this issue. And third, and last but not least, is obviously we can have the best technology, we can have the best and easiest regulatory framework around it. If there's no user acceptance, then technology cannot evolve, then we cannot have those use cases that we want to establish, we cannot have the sovereignty that we want to have. So this is something that we need to focus as well on, really on the use cases, making the technology user-friendly so that the user can accept it. This was just a short presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. I hope you liked it. And for further questions, you can reach out to me. And here's also a literature recommendation in case you want to know more about the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.